Hello.
Hello there.
We're here to talk to you about PDFs, and my lovely fellow panelists are going to introduce themselves first.
Okay, hi, I'm Christoph Sapinsky, a designer of the sci-fi DTRPG Free Spacer, which was nominated for Best Rules at the Indie Game Bakers.
Hey, so I'm Alexi Sargeant. I design and publish tabletop role-playing games under the handle Cloven Pine Games, largely through a storefront on itch.io. My game Secret Science Sewer Siblings was nominated for an ENnie for Best Free Game, and my game The Great Soul Train Robbery was nominated for an Indie Groundbreaker for Best Rules.
So I am Adriel Wilson, and I work for DTRPG, as well as being 1/4 of 9th Level Games. And our game, Mazes, was nominated for an ENnie for Best Rules and won the IGDA. And sorry, those letters just got all messed up in my mouth. Won for Best Rules. So we all, coincidentally, we're in the same categories.
It's weird. Because That's what PDFs are about.
Yep. So, basically, the reason that we wanted to have this panel is because Jason Pitry suggested it, and it seemed like an awesome idea. But as designers, where can we get our work into the hands of players? And a great space for that that's available to us are sites like DriveThruRPG and itch.io. And we wanted to get together and talk to you all about how to put your PDFs on those sites. And if you're not familiar with making a PDF, we wanted to give you some tips and tricks. We want to answer your questions and just sort of talk to you about our experiences and how we are using those sites to, spread our design work. Sound right, Chris and Alexi?
Sounds great.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so guys, where should we start? What do you think? Where should we start?
Probably with the beginning. You write a game, and then you got probably like a Word document or a Google document or a bunch of other documents. You got embedding going on, all sorts of crazy stuff. And then you're like, I want to get this to people.
It often starts as a Google Sheet.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the very first tip I have for you all is that, hey, you've laid out your beautiful RPG in Word. Please don't use Word to turn it into a PDF. Word is capable of making a PDF, but the PDFs that it makes are weird in strange back-end ways that only the designers and engineers I work with at DriveThru understand. But it's like my biggest pet peeve is like, don't make your PDFs from Word. I know that Adobe software can be prohibitively expensive, but there are alternatives out there that cost way less. Chris and I earlier were talking about Affinity. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Chris?
Yeah, so Affinity Publisher came out pretty recently. It works a lot like InDesign, which is great because you want to work in a similar manner. It kind of only works in one direction that InDesign works. In InDesign, you can work like styles down, which is my appropriate way, so I like InDesign. And if you want to, or you can work with like page up and then build styles out of that and then conform your styles. And Affinity only currently works in the latter system. What that means is, like your styles and stuff you're supposed to be using in Word, you can import those into your layout software and then use that to kind of build and put things together in certain ways. Affinity is much cheaper, though. It also doesn't have book functionality. I think it's $40 US, or in Canadian, it's $69, which is a much better price. And it's quite good. I have been building some stuff for my recent project that I'm trying to work on right now, just in Affinity, because I can just have it around all the time. So it's really good for like setting up or doing basic templates for sheets and various parts of the book that I might want to do before I do it, because I may still use InDesign in the end.
Right.
They don't transfer between each other at all.
Nope.
So anything you do in Affinity will be lost.
Ooh,
but you have some similar things.
Thanks,
Oh.
Jason. I just want to let folks know, if you're not following the chat, Jason just said, fun fact, you can do styles down if you play with the features, and they replace book functions with sections that are similar. So if you know about Affinity, that's an awesome tip. They just apparently renamed certain functions. Thank you so much, Jason.
Yeah,
if I can
spend a bit of time looking for those. Sorry, Alexi. You're not moving as much.
No worries. Last year at Metatopia, Jason suggested Affinity on a panel of some sort. I think it was a more general publishing panel, and so it happened to be on sale around about the time, so I got it. And a nice thing, Affinity is a one-time cost. It's not a membership program. Yeah, and so for my more recent designs, I've been using Affinity to lay them out. And previously I'd done work in Photoshop, which I had, and I was found it works relatively smoothly to move something from Photoshop into Affinity. Like it keeps the layers and lets you rejigger them, now that once you're ready to turn it into a nice PDF that way. So another vote of confidence in Affinity. I'll also say, for someone kind of teaching themselves, which has basically been my approach, there are good tutorials out there online. There's some basic tutorials for like starting to put together a booklet in Affinity, and even a site that talks about specifically putting together an RPG zine in Affinity. I have that bookmarked somewhere, so I will grab it and drop it into the chat.
Awesome.
Yeah,
thank you.
They have a little bit of a system for looking for answers. Like they have a big how to Affinity kind of dictionary system. It's a little bit complex, and sometimes you'll have a problem if you try to use a name from InDesign or what you think from Word or something. It's a little hard to find it, but usually you can get most of the stuff you need out of the tutorials and such.
And one thing good that I want to recommend beyond software is there are a lot of folks out there, just like us, who are working on their layout and graphic design careers, right? Like they want to do that work full time, the same way many of us want to do design work full time. And I really, really recommend seeking out folks for whom layout and graphic design is their primary interest and offering to pay them some money to do that work for you. There is no reason in the world that you have to be an expert at every part of the process of bringing your design from concept to reality. And part of the reason I say that is I think that a lot of times we as designers can get caught up in the weeds of, oh, I don't know how to draw. I don't know how to lay out a book. I don't know how to do this and that. And we feel like we have to know all those things in order to publish our own games. But we don't. There are so many folks out there. There are artists that you can find in, the Metatopia chats. And I know there are some panels introducing artists. And I really just want to say, if you choose to give away some of that work and let someone else do it for you, that's a good thing for everybody. Saves you time, saves you effort, and it's helping someone else. Of course, if you want to do it yourself, more power to you and learn as much as you can, but there is no shame whatsoever in hiring someone to do your layout.
Yeah, it's a really good idea. I'm one of those people who learns everything because I was a video game designer. So it's learning software. That's the thing I do. So it's learning layout. I actually really love layout and would actually be interested in doing more for other people too as a thing. But it's
Great.
You don't have to learn everything. I don't even try to learn most art because am married to an artist, so I don't have to worry about that part. But other sorts of art, you're still going to have to buy. And since you're going to have to buy things anyways, paying somebody a little bit of something to do some layout is a good idea.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's so necessary if you want something to look good as a PDF.
Let's talk about, if you guys don't mind, something that I see come up a lot, and I actually don't know how to fix it, is broken links in PDFs, right? You've created your PDF, you've set it up, you've laid it out, and you've put in all those awesome links because you want your players and readers to be able to jump from one point to the other. What do you guys do to solve that problem, or have you run into it?
Well, I know in InDesign, which is what I used for my big project, Free Spacer, one of the biggest things you do when you want to do a layout thing is you need to stay as organized as you can. Different people have different approaches to everything. There's at least 5 approaches to everything, but I like to try to stay super organized, put things in certain places, really keep track of them, and you can see all of your links. InDesign will warn you about links. I'm pretty sure Affinity will too if they seem broken. You can regenerate them over and over again. You have to make sure they're also being exported correctly in the export settings. And one of the, as you'll hear here, Drive-Thru has a bunch of stuff about like certain ways to follow settings to set up. I'm saying this entirely wrong. But if you go through all your links and just check those before you publish, you'll save yourself a lot of work. And make sure they work. You can look through and see them, and you can see what's linking to where, and that they're the proper type of link. Because there's in-book links, except for out-book links. And sometimes you can kind of use out-book links to do in-book links. And you'll be like, why is this such a pain? It's because you're doing it wrong, and you're making your life harder, and it will probably break.
I'll defer to your expertise. I've mostly done, 1 or 2 page games where there's much less of a, need to link from place to place. But if you want to hear more about those, come back tomorrow for the 1-page games panel I'm on at 4 p.m.
Awesome. So
yeah, I mean, you get to do magazine layout, which is so pretty. When you do full book layout, doing full magazine layout is a massive job. And so like the Morkbork guys, that was a huge layout job. It looks simple, but they had to do magazine layout for an entire book. That's a huge thing.
So, as Christoph mentioned, Drive-Thru RPG actually has a really robust publisher knowledge base. So, basically, we've laid out the steps for how to set up your PDF properly and what to do if you also want to do print on demand and how to lay out those books. And there are pages pretty much on every topic, but also we offer personalized service. So I am the indie publisher representative there, which means that any publisher who is, small and independent, like most of us are, I'm your rep. So if you email publisher services at onebookshelf.com, you're going to get me. And I'm going to do my best to help answer whatever questions you have. And I'm going to direct you sometimes to a page on the publisher knowledge base. But sometimes I'm going to take screenshots of your publisher hub and point to exactly where you need to go, because my hope is that I can make your process easier, right? Like, as a designer myself, I want all of you out there to succeed at making and selling your games. Like, I want to see the awesome stuff you're bringing into the world. So I'm here to help you do that thing. Okay, also now I'm just going to get teary again because the election. Sorry, one of you should take over.
Let's talk about Itch.io. I think Alexi has more knowledge than I do. I have one thing on Itch.io because I've I make big games, so I don't produce as many. But I know Alexi's got a lot of experience with it.
Yeah, happy to talk about it. So Itch.io is a really interesting place. There is a vibrant kind of tabletop game creator subculture on Itch.io within a broader ecosystem that's more focused on independent video games, right? Like, so you go on Itch.io, you're looking for games, you'll find like, oh, these are all video games until you toggle to physical game, which is of course a sort of a funny name for role-playing games that exist only as PDFs in many cases. But yeah, you have to go to the physical games category on Itch.io to find your way into the TTRPG indie realm that exists there. But there are lots of games, many of them free or relatively low cost, right? For me, Itch.io has not been about making a lot of money on games, but it's been about like getting my name and my games out there, for things that are like those one-page games I'm talking about, putting them up in a place where I can link people, where they can download them, they can give me a tip if they want to, right? So you can make some money, but it's not not necessarily a whole lot. There are people who have more expensive games up on Itch.io, but the culture leans more towards free and low-cost games, including games that are explicitly there as playtests, right? Games that are a kind of a rough draft of a bigger game coming later. So you can sometimes find a game that's a really cool game in development and download for relatively cheap cost the playtest packet, and and then if you want, send the designer play it and send the designer playtest feedback, and they'll appreciate it. So I guess Itch.io is not just a marketplace, but a little bit of a culture, right? There are game design jams that people organize through Itch.io that inspire lots of games. A number of my games were inspired by Itch.io jams, and then you'll see that tag on the games page. If you want, go ahead and check out Cloven Pine Games on Itch.io. You'll see a number of the games I've mentioned and other games I've created, and several of them are part of bundles, part of game jams, right? Like through Itch.io, you have ways to put your game in front of people by connecting it to these other games. It's just that it's a sort of relatively there aren't lots of gatekeepers in the market, right? So lots of games go out there. People who are on Itch.io kind of understand there's going to be some mix of quality and of polish to the games that are available. So you kind of investigate Itch.io. You try to
Oh no.
Yeah, Itch.io is a lot more open
as an indie designer, and I think it's worth investigating.
So we had a question which I actually want to talk about a little bit more in depth. But Alexi, does Itch allow watermarked PDFs like Drive-Thru does? Do you know?
So I think so, at least insofar as
I think what does that mean, custom? The person who wrote this, does that mean you custom as in you have one watermark, or that every one that's downloaded has an individual watermark, so you know who downloaded it? I've heard of that before. Yeah. I've never done it. I just don't know if that's what custom means or not in the question.
I haven't pursued that as much, but I'll tell you, my instinct is it won't have something kind of fancy and involved like that, just because, like I said, it's almost like the tabletop game part of Itch.io is a sort of a little small rivulet in the bigger stream of video games. So there are fewer things about like they let you put PDFs up, they let people pay or for free download those PDFs, but there isn't a lot of kind of checking of the PDFs or like special features related to the PDFs built into Itch.io.
Yeah, Jason's saying you put the name of the person on the bottom every one, so you can tell who shares. I think it's the whole idea of that. So you can hey, look on this share site. It says Bob Lux on the bottom of every single page. Bob, please stop sharing my game.
At Drive-Thru, we have an optional watermark of your PDF feature. So it's on once you've got your PDF and you've created your title listing, on the edit a listing page, there is a checkbox down towards the bottom that allows you to enable watermarks on your PDFs. And the reason that it is off by default is that we found that it just clogged up our servers to no end. And some people wanted it and some people didn't. And another feature of that watermarked PDF is once you click on the watermark, you have the option to toggle a feature that does not allow cut and paste and a feature that does not allow printing. Now, from my perspective as a person who swims in the big indie sea, I don't really want a watermark on my PDFs, but I know a lot of people do. And something that Christoph mentioned is super true. I get reports of folks who are like, hey, someone shared my game on another site that distributes things, and I know they did because there's a watermark on it. So it really depends on what your needs are for your own title. And while we're talking about that type of thing, there is both a quick / flash preview option on drive-through as well as a full preview option. And I know a lot of indie folks are like, oh, I don't want to turn on that full preview option because then everybody can just read my work and not actually download it. But the full preview gets its own kind of watermark, which it says sample in red across each page of the preview. So no one can really like take a screenshot or take your work in that manner.
It's also customizable. So if you have a larger work, usually what you want to do is you want to include some cool looking stuff from the beginning and your table of contents. The table of contents is one of the most ignored when people talk about marketing elements, but actually useful things because it lets people see what the hell's in your book.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it tells you exactly what's in the book. So everybody's very excited when like the newest D&D expansion or whatever put out their table of contents because everybody's like, okay, I can see exactly what's in there. So you don't have to wait. It's like, well, what did they include here or there? But it's the same thing for your stuff. It's like, oh, I can tell this person has a huge GM section that explains how to play their game, or they don't, or that when it's really long, it's actually a really spread out, spacious book because I could tell there's like very, less things in there in the table of contents. So it's something I always try to include in my, larger preview, just the first few pages and like the preface part of the book and the table of contents.
Also recommend, like, if you've got a really nice piece of art in your book or a flavor section that will give folks a feel for what they're getting, definitely include those pages in your preview because it just, folks want to know what they're buying. They want your game and you want them to buy your game, but there are these like mental blocks that come up when, like, you know how it is, unless it's like, for me, if it's in a blind box, I'm gonna buy it because I want to know what the surprise is. But most people want that preview. They want to know what they're getting into and what type of game it is. And like, when you're making your PDFs, consider them the finished book product of your game. Make sure you create a cover that's included in your PDF. Like Christoph said, make sure you've got a table of contents if it's useful for your title. Make sure you've got a back cover. And please, 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 whatever type of copyright you're using, whether it's, totally open or super closed, make sure you include that on a page in your book as well. And you were going to say something, Christoph?
Yeah, so there's a whole process, and it took me a while. I didn't really realize this existed. So when you create a cover for a PDF, it is different than a cover for a physical book. Because, a cover for a physical book is a separate file that you send to the printer that is printed entirely separately and then put on the front. But a cover for a PDF, the front and back cover are usually the first 2 pages of the book. So you have the front, and then the second It's a little bit tetchy sometimes to get them out if you've also made your game for the physical version. The sizes might be a little bit different, so you might want to spend a little bit of extra time tweaking it. Last thing you want is a beautifully centered title that is weirdly to the side because you just kind of automatically put that there. And you can put your front and back first and then all your interior stuff, because then people are presented with the beautiful art that's on the front and back of your book and a summary. The back cover is a summary of your book usually. It has a little thing that you tell everybody what the book is about, and it's a really nice thing to see. And I think this brings me to something that Alexi introduced that I think we really need to talk about, which is PDF distribution as marketing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big thing. You can bundle your own books with your free character sheets. You can put stuff in advance out before your game is even done, and then update it later on both itch.io and Drive-Thru. I believe you can do updates like that.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
then they also have things like email lists and that sort of thing that allow you to talk to people and build. I wish I would have done way more of that. I probably would have increased the size of my community before the Kickstarter if I would have done a lot more of this sort of thing. You don't want to be like bugging them constantly, but if you're giving new things and updating character sheets, most people don't consider that a problem. They consider that, hey, look, new stuff's coming out for my game. It's like DLC.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah, for the Great Soul Train robbery, I put out a free, 2-page version on itch.io, and then I kickstarted the zine version during last year's Zine Quest, and I was able to both direct people to the itch.io page to, basically download the 2-page version as a preview, so they would see if they're interested in backing the Kickstarter. And I could, reach out to folks who, downloaded the initial version on itch.io. I could update the itch.io page and otherwise kind of try to direct people towards the Kickstarter once they'd connected with the game through that smaller free version also.
So, yeah, Christoph really touched on something there with the email list. So I cannot answer for itch.io because I don't think they have this feature, but one of the things that you can do on Drive-Thru is we give every publisher every month an amount of publisher promotion points. And what those points can be used for are sending customer emails to your customers, increasing, where you are on the front page, a lot of stuff. I don't want to get too into the weeds there, but what I want to say is when someone has downloaded your PDF, if they have given us permission to send them emails, when you go to send a customer email, you can set it up just like you would, in any kind of like web form, and it will go to all of your customers who we have permission to email, and you'll get a result from that. And the really nice thing is exactly what Christoph said. It's building your base and it's building the community around your games. And it's a feature that I don't see people use near enough because it's free. So we got another question, Mo. Enough to get a taste for what the style of the game. I'm sorry, I didn't repeat the question. How much art do you want in your previews? And that is enough to show what type of art is in the game. At least one piece, but doesn't really need to be more than that. So
probably your cover.
Yeah,
that
definitely.
should be your best art.
Yeah.
And sometimes it isn't because you did something like a leathery cover or something, but then maybe the next piece should be then. You want that in the PDF because they're going to look at it. Everybody likes to look at the large size PDF. The little one is really tiny. I definitely push on the large size Drive-Thru. Looks a lot nicer.
For itch.io, there's some interesting options for what's in your preview. It kind of, firstly, it asks for your preview in the form of screenshots, because again, the assumption is it's a video game, right? But you can just put in, JPEGs, right, of art from your game, or JPEGs that are shot showing some interesting mechanic or move from your game to whet people's appetites. Playbooks could be the preview on itch.io. You can also include a gameplay trailer, right? But it's just a video link. And so for my games, I've often just put in video of an actual play, because I've run the game online, run it say over StreamYard, and have that video up on Cloven Pine Games YouTube, and then that video is right there on the itch.io page. If someone browsing is like, I want to see what it's like when this game is played, they can click play and check out that actual play, and that kind of becomes its own part of the preview that's available.
You can do that on your product pages on DriveThru as well. There is a link down at the bottom of that edit a title listing page where you can pop in your YouTube link of your actual play or whatever commercial you've made. And it is one of the most useful features of both sites, because as we live in a world where we are increasingly communicating the way we're communicating with you all right now, videos really, really make a difference. And I got a note from Jason, thank you for the reminder, that those customer emails that DriveThru can send, you can also use them to promote your Kickstarters. So publishers are not allowed to send Kickstarter links in their own customer emails. So what you would do is email me, publisherservices@onebookshelf.com, and say, hey, I'd like to send an email to my customers with my Kickstarter link in it, and I'll give you all the details via email. But it really, really makes a difference. I have seen huge boosts to campaigns after sending out those emails. And yeah, I just did one for Jason. I think it was last week. So please, please use that feature. Use all of those built-in marketing features on any site where you've got your PDFs, because they're essentially free to you, and they're to the point Christoph made earlier. Building your audience before your Kickstarter is going to do a lot to make it more likely that you're going to succeed and hit or hopefully exceed your goals.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I didn't actually know about that, so this is a really good thing to learn.
Send me an email. I will send it for you.
That's really good. But like, one of the other things you can do is this. Both itch.io and DriveThru often do bundles, and they'll do bundles for like good things, like they did them for the fires, they did for a variety of things, Black Lives Matter, all those great things that you probably are like, hey, I'm a poor game designer, I can't really just throw money at these people, and I'm not in the right place or whatever. But at least, even if you do those things, one of the things you can also do is give your game away basically free for a while by joining a bundle. And then you get the added bonus of 1,000 people probably never heard of your game. Maybe will never actually even open the bundle and see your game, to be honest. But now they're on your email list through DriveThru or whatever systems itch.io has, and they will see updates for your game now when you update them, for sure. And you can sometimes send them the emails the same way, so they'll get notified about your Kickstarter and be like, who now? I followed what now? Oh, this. Hey, cool. I never remembered. I didn't even know I had this game. And now they have your game, even though they probably never heard of you, which is kind of an interesting thing that ends up happening because of these things.
Funny story.
I mean,
Oh, sorry, Alexi.
Yeah, go for it.
I was just going to say, when we all met each other and Alexi mentioned that he was Cloven Pine Games, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm already following you on itch. Because like I had seen one of his games, like either it was in a bundle I bought or it was like recommended, and I was like, these look like cool games. I'm going to follow this designer.
Thank you so much. And Jason's mentioned in the chat there is a bundle for supporting Metatopia of experimental indie games, and I have a game in that bundle, the Tabula Initiative, about amnesiac assets outrunning their past. Interesting thing I've seen some folks do on Itch.io is, like, if they've got a game that was in a major bundle, like the bundle for racial justice that was a big deal earlier this year, they'll sometimes add on the game's page at the top, hey, if you bought such and such a bundle, you already own this game. Check out your downloads to download it, right? And then a little promotional tag, right? And follow this game designer on Twitter, right? But that's a kind of cool way to just acknowledge the ecosystem there, where people people will have your game without noticing it if they bought it in a big bundle and haven't worked through the bundle, which mostly people don't, right? Mostly people pick out the ones that jump out at them and then only remember later that they own the other games.
It's the Steam effect, I like to think of it.
Mm-hmm.
I have 10,000 games. I have not looked at them. I'm playing the same game for the last year. That happens, and it's just part of the system of making PDFs. Like, people are going to have your game and don't know about it. It's an interesting approach, because then when you're, say, on a panel or talking to somebody at a convention or something, and then they find out they already own your game on PDF, a lot of times they'll feel like, oh, that guy was cool, and then they'll look at it and be like, that's pretty cool, and then they'll buy a physical version if you have it.
Yeah.
And a physical to PDF is quite the thing too, because physical has this respect that PDFs don't necessarily have. It's just the fact. But you will probably make as much money on your PDFs as you would make on your physical, but your physicals kind of promote your PDFs and vice versa. There's a weird kind of system there where they kind of orbit each other in a really interesting way. So if you're making a bigger game or doing a Kickstarter for a physical version of your game, it will matter that you have a PDF, and it will matter that you have the physical book. But they'll both matter in a different way.
There's an accessibility to PDFs, but there's this like you said, a
prestige,
a sense of reality to the physical book, right? People when you can hold something in your hands, you believe that it's real and legit, right? And even if it's from an indie publisher, right? Even if it's a print on demand thing, right? Like it's still, once it's printed, it's like, yeah, this is a real game. I could put this on the shelf next to Dungeons and Dragons, and as a designer, that's an exciting feeling. And the hope is that the two streams will continue to enhance each other. That you're not competing with yourself with PDF and physical. They're going to hopefully keep building up an audience with both of them.
This
I think
PDF
that's actually
that you're making right now, that we're talking about, that you're going to put on Drive-Thru and you're going to put on Itch, that is not the PDF you are going to use for your book. That's a whole different panel, and I'm super happy to help you with it. You can just grab me in Discord or whatever, but don't use your digital PDF for your printed book. They have different requirements.
Okay. But your InDesign files can be the same. Mm-hmm. Or if you want to be fancy, like Mr. Fancy Pants here, you could do something like make your PDF a full color version of your book, while your print version, you can't afford that. It's black and white, right? So I have a full color PDF, black background because it's Space Game, all that sort of stuff, with orange highlights because that's the part of the color palette. But my physical version, I can't afford that. I would have had to have a lot bigger Kickstarter to do that, and it was a stretch goal, but we didn't get there. But we decided to do it anyways on the PDF. And so you can do stuff like that. You can even do stuff where you make the PDF more different. That's a little bit weird because then page numbers might not match. So that's one of those things, depending on the size and shape of your game, that you have to think about. So if you have a game that has a very specific physical printing, like it's part of a zine and it goes out of physical printing, when you make the PDF, you could do it in a different way if you wanted. As long as they're somehow relatable, it's a freedom you have. It's up to you as a designer if you think it's a good idea or not, but it's something you have freedom to do.
Yeah. I just want to wave and say hi to my friends Jess and Mike who just tuned in. I just had to.
Hi, Jess and Mike. So,
Go ahead.
do we have
Sorry.
any other questions?
I think we've gotten all the questions that are in the chat currently. So we wanted to talk a little bit about PDFs and virtual tabletops.
Yes. PDFs are great for virtual tabletops, but they're never the same thing, ever.
Right.
I've seen that question asked on Roll20 stuff. By the way, FreeSpacer has huge, completely, I spent some money on them, character sheets for Roll20. So I do have a little bit of a foot in that pond. I don't work for them or anything, but it is a different environment. They make their things in a different way. So if you want to put your game on Roll20, you can't just upload a PDF. You can't just upload the character sheets. You have to do a separate and in some ways probably slightly more intensive situation than you have to do to create a PDF. There's no system to bring it in from InDesign. It's a whole other deal. And It's a really interesting thing that I'm watching, but it's so new that Roll20 is the example of a popular set, doesn't even have direct directions. You have to contact them if you want your core book on there. They've just started expanding it out. And compendium stuff, which is a special one that allows you to do weird drag and drop between sheets and stuff, is only for like D&D and Pathfinder related products. They don't have it for, like, I can't make a FreeSpacer compendium yet. It's not a thing. I'm looking at it, but it's like, how much am I willing to put into it? PDFs are a lot easier, and people use PDFs during play. And people will probably use your game with Roll20, or there's a new one that's coming out that's just finished its Kickstarter and stuff called Roll, I think. Is that what it's called?
Roll
is that right?
is the new guy trying to kind of put forward a it's kind of an indie leaning RPG tabletop platform.
Yeah, it has a different setup than, like, if you ever play on Roll20, you'll have sheets that kind of look like the sheets maybe that you play with in person or some variant of that. And then you'll have ones that are on Roll will be like, it's a built-in system that's almost like software-y. So you'll have little fields you can open and this sort of thing. It looks very different. It's really interesting. I've been watching it. I didn't do the Kickstarter because I'm a skeptical person, but I'm really interested to see what they're going to do.
We should say it's Roll it's Roll ROLE, so like the role you play, not the roll of the dice. It looks like their goal is to make a more like editable system where anyone can kind of build a character sheet for the game they want to play on Roll, but they aren't quite there yet, right? They're still in beta, but it's an interesting goal. I'm looking in from the outside. I haven't tried to build up something on Roll20, but it definitely seems like a brave new world here. I love what they built for Agon from Evil Hat. I got to play Agon on Roll20, and their character sheet is really slick, right? I'm impressed by that. So if you're looking for a good example, there's one to look at.
And we at Drive Through RPG have recently partnered with Astral, which is another virtual tabletop contender, and there is a pretty easy way, as far as I understand it, to convert your existing products on Drive-Thru into an Astral module. Now, I personally have not done that yet, so I don't know the process, but it is a thing that I can help get you to the right place if it's something you want to do. Because, one of the things that the three of us talked about, when we were talking about this panel beforehand, is like the direction that we see RPGs going is really embracing that virtual tabletop world. And like, as much as I much prefer like books and the physical world, it's just a reality that that's the direction our industry is headed, at least in part. And it is worth finding a way to get your stuff on as many platforms as possible, because one thing that I have picked up from a long career in video and tabletop games is that just seeing your name and your game more than once helps trigger folks to want to buy it. It's just a human thing. We like the familiar. So the more familiar you can make your product, not in terms of what it looks like, but in terms of how often people see it, the more likely you are to just get more passive sales. So
yeah,
really
you do have to be careful with that. Oh, sorry, Alexi.
I was just saying that's a great point.
Totally. But you do have to be careful about splitting. I'm a one-ship fleet, like many people are. It's pretty much me and my wife who does some art, and then whoever we bring in or pay for, mostly around Kickstarters and stuff. So when you want to do something, like I spent some money on Roll20 and did some stuff on it, and I've been just on there with a pro license probably too many times, probably some months that I didn't really get money out of. But putting stuff into these systems is a development sink. It can sink time and money if you're not careful. Mm-hmm. So you have to decide, is this one I want? That's why Alexi and I are looking at Roll. That's why I've looked at Astral, but haven't totally jumped in yet because I haven't been this sure. And I jumped into Roll20 because I saw it on streams, and I didn't realize there was as many others. There's also the other virtual tabletop one that is, or Fantasy Tools, what's it called?
Fantasy Grounds.
Fantasy Grounds, which is more like D&D. It's a little bit more old. They actually did a whole new version in Unity, which is a software like engine that video games often use. So the new version of Fantasy Grounds uses Unity, which is really exciting for me because I actually know how to program and work in Unity. I've done entire video games in it. So I've been looking at them, but I know they're very dominated a little bit more by particular types of games like Dungeons and Dragons and that sort of thing. I mean, just their name, Fantasy Grounds. So I've had to just discuss and think on how much I want to put into these systems. So you'll have to decide that for yourself. Going on everything is great, but you kind of have to maintain them. So what happens when you find there's a bug and now you've got to change it on how many locations? It's like, oh, you got to update your PDF here, your PDF there, all of your, it can get a little much. So scope it. That's all I'm saying.
That's a really good point, Christoph. Like remember, you only have so much time and energy, and picking the platforms you want to be on is good. And like, of course, I'm going to recommend drive-through because you get that added bonus of being able to sort of back end into Astral with less work than I think it would be otherwise. But like, just think about who your audience is. Like for me, for my games, right? Like my personal games, not my 9th level games. 9th level is everywhere. But for my personal games, Itch is a great place for me to be. I'm also on drive-through, of course, because I love it and I know how it works. But Itch is a great place to be because my games are about being queer and stuff. And that's where I'm going to find a lot of that community.
And actually, one of the most interesting things about this is when Itch came out, I could tell there was a speed up of a particular priority list at drive-through because they saw a slightly easier interface in certain ways. And there was a speed up on that front there because they're aware of the industry. They know that people are fine with them. They know they're the main location. Everybody does, though. Everybody knows that everybody else exists. So more of these things we have and the more cool features they have, then everybody will also start doing these, and we'll see who wins. But we hopefully will be the ones who win as designers.
There's room for a lot of different players in this space, and some players are going to be better at other things than others are, and that's great, and that's okay. And Drive-Thru is working very hard on our new site, and I literally cannot wait to get it out into the world so that folks can use it, because I think it's gonna be a real upgrade. Like, as a person who has worked in both video game and tabletop in those design spaces, I know how difficult it is to update your underlying engine, right? Like, if you see someone out there who's got a great new feature, you can't necessarily grab that feature instantly because you have this structured architecture that already exists. And what's really interesting about PDFs, to get back to our main topic, is that, like, I went to school for library science, and I remember, like, it was years and years ago, so I remember being excited about PDFs because it was like this magic document that not only showed you, like, the stuff in the document, but it contained in itself all the information the reader needed to properly show you what the PDF looked like. Like, under the hood, it's this little magic ball of information, and it's just freaking great. But anyway, that was well into the weeds.
One of the things that
Let me
sorry, go ahead.
yeah. If I can just jump in with one other kind of just stray thought about this this question of publishing PDFs, I just want to encourage anyone out there who is putting out games as PDFs to submit those games for awards considerations.
Yes.
For many awards, you don't need a printed physical copy to submit it. I put in my game that's just a 2-page free game meant to introduce people to RPGs called Secret Science Sewer Siblings, where you play as Teenage Mutant Ninja Critters, and it got a nomination. It successfully got nominated for a best free game or product at the Ennies, and I think that helped put my game design brand out there, and brought the game to folks' attention. So even though it exists primarily, as a PDF, it's a legit game. It's a real game you can play, and award shows know that. They understand that a PDF game is a legit contender, and so don't be afraid to put them out there and try to get your name out there that way.
Well, I think that's particularly poignant with the group of us. We're all nominated, and one of us won for the same category at the same place, but our games are so vastly different in scale and in how the rules came to be and that sort of thing. Like, mine is like a mid-indie at 300 and something pages. Alexi's is much smaller and completely different distribution, and then Mazes uses a system that was also used in this other game and is also going to be coming out in other games, and then is built into like sets of books and stuff, like completely different things. They're all in the same category, and I think it'd be really hard to judge personally, but you see these things and they're like, this is a PDF, this is like 5 books, but it's also a PDF in different ways, and this is like a classic book but it has a PDF, and this might have like a wiki or something. You got all sorts of weirdness going on out there, and you might as well jump in with all of it because everybody sees that there's a big soup out there to deal with. And so just because you're just a PDF, if you do your best, you might as well ask people to notice it, right?
Absolutely. We got a question, and I don't know the answer. Maybe one of you does. Is there an award for PDF gaming fanzines and magazines? I don't know. I don't think that there is, but I don't know.
I feel like this is the sort of thing that like might sometimes be a category at the Ennies, right?
Yeah, best digital product is a
the Ennies will, like,
sometimes.
They'll based on how many submissions they get, right? They'll have they'll expand and contract the categories they do in a year. So I think it's totally worth it to check that out, see if there's a see if there's a category that makes sense, and just submit, right? Because if it's something really cool, they'll come up with a category to give it the nod in.
The other caveat on these is almost every awards thing out there requires it to be something you published this year.
Right.
Yes.
So
yes.
It has to be
And
published like not too much before the last awards that they put out was for almost all of them. And
The
free
double
products,
check exactly
all
what
that
they
sort of
mean.
stuff can be, but
Double check exactly what they mean by published, right? Because sometimes
that's
if
hard.
it's like a substantial new edition, right, or
New
a
editions are good.
you know, right, there's sometimes something can be published this year, even if there'd been another version of it available in the past.
I was actually going to suggest, if you've had a game and you've had it out for a bit and you've kind of considered an ash can, you could say full version and put it out, make sure there's a full PDF that comes out within award season, put a little extra love into it, and get it out there as in like a more final version, whatever that may be, as your proper first edition, and leave behind your ash can or your experimental or your free version, make it a pay what you want version, and then all of a sudden it's like a new thing. And if you haven't applied before, they'll probably still consider it published this year. If you applied several times, they might be a little less excited. I don't know. It depends on, relationships and how it's done.
Hey friends, it looks like we have only 4 minutes left. So I was thinking we should just like reintroduce ourselves, tell people where to find us if they're looking, and if you have more questions, I'm in the Metatopia Discord. My username is Adriel. You're welcome to get me there. And since I've started this, I'll just keep talking. Sorry. You can find me on Twitter. My personal /design Twitter is @ReindeerB. And you can also find me at 9th Level Games on Twitter. And if you are looking for me in a drive-through RPG capacity, just email publisherservices@onebookshelf.com. You'll get me. Tell me you were watching the panel, and I'll be able to answer more questions that way. Thank you all for being here.
And we'll all put this in the chat, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm having trouble getting to the chat, so if someone doesn't mind dropping a link for me in there, that would be great. So I'm around under the brand Cloven Pine Games. You can find me on itch.io, where a bunch of my games are available for free or for very reasonable prices. You can also follow Cloven Pine Games on Twitter, or follow my Substack newsletter. There should be links to that at both of these places, where I send out just some game design thoughts and some discussion of games I've run and played each month. Always happy to chat about game design, chat about publishing free games and PDFs. Hit me up on any of those places, and I would love to hear about your games as well. Thanks so much for coming.
Okay, so I'm Christoph Sapinsky. I made a game called Free Spacer, and you can learn all about that on freespacer.com, and hear all about my brilliant insights, or mostly, random cat pictures and some retweets, at Zophra. That's XOPHRA. The raw stands for Random Alien. Random Alien Games would have meant it was Zophrag, which would have been terrible. So it's Zophra. And I'll post this in the thing. Thanks to everybody for coming. We're glad we could make PDFs interesting, I hope.
Yeah.
Because it can be a bit dry. It is really a printing format we all decided to read with our eyes. Probably a terrible idea, but they've supported us doing so. So it's worked out.